Parsha class, Parshas Bo, and so tell you a story. In 2008, there was during one of the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts in Israel, there was a Kiruv rabbi, a rabbi who specialized in Jewish outreach, and he went into Ashkelon in order to mechazik, to strengthen and to lift up the spirits of the people who were being affected by the bombs which were being rained down into Ashkelon and those cities near Gaza. And he went there to be mechazik, to strengthen them, and also to teach Torah and to teach people mitzvahs, people who are less observant, and that was what he was doing. So as he was driving through Ashkelon, all of a sudden there was a siren, and the siren, obviously meant he had to take cover, and he swerved to the side of the road. And as he swerved to the side of the road, a dog came running in front of his car, and he killed the dog. Right, killed the dog. So after the siren was over, and after it was safe to go out again, so the family, the owner of the dog, came out. It was a secular family who owned this dog, and they came out and they were crying over the fact that this dog was killed, and it was very, very painful for them. Obviously, it was a very special dog to them. And the rabbi he felt so bad and felt so remorseful, and wanted to comfort them in whatever way he could, and to do whatever he could for them. So he was offering them money, and he was trying to comfort them, and obviously he couldn't really do anything about it, but it wasn't his fault anyway. And the family was so appreciative, the couple was so appreciative and so impressed by this rabbi's empathy. And it also kind of broke a little bit the stereotypes that this secular couple had about Orthodox rabbis in Israel. And they struck up a relationship. So they actually struck up a relationship with each other. And the rabbi started coming to visit the family, the couple, and started teaching them Torah, giving them classes, learning with them, and they slowly but surely became more observant. And in their own enthusiasm, in their Jewish practice, they offered the rabbi to have classes in their house, and eventually it led to the total dedication of a whole room they had in the basement, like a big room, and they dedicated this room to a Torah center inside their house. So this, as a result of this siren, which ended up killing their dog, so it resulted in the fact that now there was a Torah center, there was a Kiruv center, an outreach center inside this couple's house. And guest speakers would come to the house, many people would come to the lectures, the classes, and many people became more observant as a result of this. And it became a whole thing in the city of Ashkelon. So, eventually after they established this room inside their house, so they wanted to make a dedication. And the couple, they had a plaque. They made a plaque. And they came to the rabbi and asked him his advice about the actual wording on the plaque. And the plaque read, Zeicha. The exact wording of the room was named Zichron Igor. Zichron Igor. So Zichron means in memory of Igor. And who's Igor? Igor was the dog. So they named the study center, Zichron Igor, the study center of Zichron, to memorialize Igor the dog. And their question was, should they write underneath the plaque, in memory of Igor, our dog, who died in the war, or was killed in a car accident? And that was their shaila to the rabbi. And, that's what they wanted to know. But the rabbi was more bothered by a more basic question. Is it proper? Is it appropriate to name a building, to name a shul after a dog? It doesn't seem so kind of proper to name it after a dog or after a cat or after an animal. Now, obviously, I don't know how many people have animals and have dogs, but people who are very attached to their animals, it's very resonant. It's not so far-fetched, the entire notion. But halachically, from a Jewish perspective point of view, is that proper to name a house, a building, after an animal, after a dog? Zichron Igor, in this case over here. So the rabbi, this Kiruv rabbi, he decided to go to a very famous rabbi in Bnei Brak. His name is Rabbi Zilberstein. Rabbi Zilberstein deals with a lot of contemporary practical questions, and you can find all of his response in many different books which are translated into English. They're very, very interesting books, very interesting questions. So before giving the answer, right, Rabbi Zilberstein himself went through different sources in the Talmud about the significance of recognizing animals, So, for example, the Gemara says in Yoma, there's a Gemara in Tractate Yoma which cites the sage Reb Yochanan ben Torsa. Ben Torsa, Torsa, is how it's transliterated, not after the torso of a person's body, but the word torsa is Aramaic for an ox, a bull, a cow. So his name was Reb Yochanan ben Torsa, Reb Yochanan the son of the cow. Right? This is a sage in the Talmud. And the story behind it, the commentaries explain, is that there was a certain Jew who owned a cow, and as is the halacha, the law, if you own a cow, an animal, you're not allowed to work your animal on Shabbos, just like you're not allowed to work your machinery. Any machine which you have to turn everything off before Shabbos. I'm not going to get into the issue of clocks, of electronic timers, but if you have an animal, you have to stop it working on Shabbos. So he had this ox, he couldn't plow it on Shabbos, so for many, many, many years, he trained his cow not to work, not to do anything on Shabbos, never did any. So it was trained to know that when Shabbos comes, you don't work, you don't do any plowing, and that was how the cow operated. Eventually, the owner hit upon hard times. He had to sell his cow, and he sold his cow to a non-Jew. And this non-Jew obviously is not observing Shabbos, and therefore anything which he owns doesn't have to observe Shabbos either. So he put his new cow to work, to plowing in the field. And worked fine for the first 6 days. And on Shabbos, the first week, all of a sudden the cow wouldn't work. It wouldn't plow the field on Shabbos. And this non-Jew was like perplexed what was going on. And this happened the second week and the third. And it was driving him crazy. And he needed the cow to work 7 days a week. So he goes back to the original owner, the Jewish owner, and he says, listen, I need a refund. I want to return it to you. I want a refund. And I'm giving the cow back. It doesn't work for me on Shabbos. So the Jewish owner, the previous Jewish owner, whispers into the ears of the cow, and he says to the cow, he says, listen, while you were the possession, the property of me, the Jew, so then it's right that you weren't allowed to work on Shabbos. Right? But now that you've become the property of the non-Jew, you are allowed to work on Shabbos, and therefore you're allowed to work on Shabbos. Don't worry about it. It's nothing wrong with it. You're not breaking any Jewish law by working on Shabbos for this non-Jewish owner. Go back to work on Shabbos, and that's what happens. So the cow heeded the advice, the instructions of the previous Jewish owner, and the non-Jewish owner was very happy. But the non-Jewish owner was so amazed by this phenomenon. He found out what the Jewish owner had said to the cow. The Jewish owner was so moved by the notion that he said, if an animal which has no free will and has albeit it's one of God's creations, but is certainly not created in God's image, if this animal heeds and pays attention to the instructions of its owner, then how much more so shall I, created in God's image, I should pay attention to the instructions of my owner, my creator. And he was inspired by this animal, and he converted to Judaism. This is how the Talmud explains it. He converted to Judaism, and he became a great sage, a Talmudic sage. And because the cow inspired him to become Jewish, he named himself Yochanan ben Torsa, Yochanan the son of the cow, because the cow was really what gave birth to his Jewish identity and his conversion. And so therefore, so you see one source for the fact that we can recognize an animal. He became his name, Rabbi Yochanan ben Torsa. Another famous rabbi, though, on the other hand, this is really not the majority opinion. There was another famous rabbi that he wanted to have a dog taken out of his courtyard, which was menacing him and the family, and he wouldn't actually say kelev. It's okay for me to say this because I don't think anyone else holds it this way, but the word kelev is Hebrew for dog, and he wouldn't actually pronounce the word kelev, dog. He would pronounce it as kaf lamed bet, the spelling of the words, because he felt that the dog, this particular rabbi, didn't favor the characteristics, the character of a dog, and he wouldn't even pronounce the name kelev properly. And the reason for this is based upon a medrash that says that there are three incredibly, exceedingly brazen creatures in this world. There are three brazen creatures in this world. The brazen creature of the animal kingdom is the dog. Has a certain chutzpah about it. The brazen creature of the fowl is the chicken. And the brazen creature of people, of human beings, is guess who? It's you and I. It's the Jewish people. The Medrash says that the most brazen people are the Jewish people. Now, it could be taken negatively, but the truth is it can be taken positively as well. Because brazenness is a very, very important quality to have. Azus the Kedusha. brazenness for the sake of doing mitzvahs, brazenness for the sake of sanctity and holiness. But because this particular rabbi wasn't so, he perceived in this medrash a little bit of a message that a dog's brazenness is not something to be lauded and appreciated, so therefore he wouldn't pronounce the word dog properly. But that was that one rabbi. But going back to other stories which support the importance of recognizing an animal, there was another Gemara which says that, you have to imagine this, there was a very distinguished guest invited to a particular person's house. So just imagine for a second, you're a very important person, at least you think you're important, and you're invited to your friend's house for a meal, for Shabbos, and he says, listen, please, Bart, please sit over here, I'll have a very special seat for you. And he seats you right next to his dog. Right? He's like, I'm going to put you right next to my dog. That's where your seat's going to be at the table. And that's what the Gemara says. He took this host took the distinguished guest, he put him next to the dog. So the guest was very upset about it. He says, no, you don't understand. He says, the reason why is because this dog is very special to me. This dog saved my wife's life. There was one time a kidnapper tried to kidnap my wife, and this dog over here, saved my wife, bit the kidnapper, and my wife's life was saved. And because of the honor I want to give to the dog, I'm putting him next to you. I'm not putting you next to the dog. I'm making sure that my dog, which deserves so much honor, is being placed next to you, my distinguished guest. And then there was another Gemara which says that there were certain shepherds that were milking their animal, their cow, and when they stepped away from the bucket of the milk, so a snake went inside the bucket and drank some of the milk from the bucket, which put poison inside the bucket, and then the only thing which was left remaining there that could see this was their dog. When they came back, they wanted to drink some of the milk, but the dog started barking wildly to stop them from drinking the milk because it had a perception that the venom inside the milk was going to be damaging to them, and they tried to go ahead and drink the milk. And then how this works exactly, but the dog himself took it upon himself and drank the milk and died. And because of this, the shepherds honored the dog by making a whole memorial plaque on its grave, on the grave of the dog, to memorialize the fact that this dog saved their lives. So, and then, so all of these sources, the Maharsha, one of the famous commentaries in the Gemara, says that the word kelev, going back to the word kelev, dog, is comprised of those three letters, kaf, lamed, bet, which can also be spelled or pronounced ka-lev or kulo-lev, like a heart, or the way the Maharsha explains it, that kulo-lev, that a dog is entirely heart. It has compassion and loyalty to its masters. We know from experience it's the most loyal of creatures. Kulo-lev, completely full of heart and loyalty for its master. So from all of these sources, it certainly indicates that that it's okay to honor a dog. And therefore, Reb Zilberstein ruled on the case of the Zichron ego, which I really want to look this up. I want to find it. I didn't look online to find it because it became such a popular Torah center in Ashkelon. So I'm sure there's a website about it called Zichron Igor. And he ruled it was okay. He didn't say it was, you shouldn't do it. He didn't say definitely do it, but it was certainly okay based upon these sources that it was okay. So that place was called Zichron Igor in memory of the dog. Now, I know that you're wondering, what in the world does this have to do with the Porsche? Why am I telling this story? Because one of the sources that he brought was from this week's Torah portion. And it's in chapter 11, verse 6 and 7. And it describes, this is in the description of the Makas Bechoros, the 10th plague of the slaying of the firstborn Egyptian males. So the pasuk says, there was a tremendous cry in the entire land of Egypt, that like it there was never heard before, and like it there will never be again. And this is actually Hashem telling Moshe what's going to be in the future with this plague. About this plague, it hasn't actually happened yet, but he tells him, realize, don't worry, for the entire Jewish people, lo yachretz kelev l'shono, no dog will howl in Egypt to endanger the Jewish people when this is happening. When the Makas Bechoros, the slaying of the firstborn, is taking place, the Jewish people will be completely safe, and no dog will even howl. No dog will bark, which is typical for As we just said before, that animals and dogs will protect their owner, will bark terribly and violently to protect their owners. No dog, lo yachretz kelev l'shona, no dog will bark l'mishvat be'ema l'man teidin asher yifla Hashem bein Mitzrayim bein Yisrael, in order that you should know that I'm distinguishing between the Jewish people and the Egyptians. So no dog will howl. So what's therefore what? So later on, in a few portions from now, in Parshas Mishpatim, chapter 22, verse 30, Pasuk says, this is in an unrelated passage, but in Parshas Mishpatim it says, Anshe Kodesh tiyun le, you shall be a holy nation, Hashem says to the Jewish people. Make sure to maintain holiness and kedusha and sanctity in your camp. Be a holy people to me. Ubasa basada treif lo, don't eat treif meat. Don't eat treif, which, as a side, treif means specifically, I know treif has a generic definition to refer to all non-kosher food, but strictly speaking, treif refers to a kosher species that was shechted correctly according to halacha, and then discovered to have had an injury, either an internal injury or an external injury, to render it not kosher. You can't eat it. So that's the strict definition of treifa. Another definition of non-kosher is a kosher species, but wasn't shechted properly. So regular chicken and meat, which you buy in the supermarket, that's not called treifa per se. That's called nevela. That's called, I think they translate it as carrion. It's kosher species like a chicken or a cow, but not shechted according to halacha. That's colloquially called treif as well, but strictly speaking, that's called nevela. But here the pasuk, for some reason, I don't know why, here the pasuk is zeroing in specifically on treif. Again, an animal which was shechted properly, but found to have had an internal injury which renders it not kosher. So the Torah says, be holy and don't eat treif. And logic dictates that it applies to all non-kosher food as well. Be holy, don't eat non-kosher food. What do you do with this food? Listen to this. What do you do with this food? Lekelev, tashlichanoso. Throw the treif food to the dogs. Give the treif to the dogs. Now, is that an insult? No, it's not an insult. It's actually a result of the appreciation and the gratitude that Hashem had for the dogs in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, for not barking at the time of Makas Bechoros, and therefore they're rewarded. God does not withhold the reward of any creature. And since they helped the Jewish people when they left Mitzrayim, so therefore they're rewarded by being given the treif meat. It's a reward. And a whole pasuk, or a part of a pasuk, is expressed for that purpose. It says over here, let me read the note over here, it says that the Torah teaches us to show gratitude, just as God does not let any good deed go unrewarded. And the dogs didn't howl, therefore, where practicable, we should show our appreciation by throwing meat to them. And I don't know in practice how that's done, but that's the point. So Rav Zilberstein, in response to this question about the Zichron Igor, he quoted this Gemara, this Medrash as well, that you see as well that credit is being given to the dogs. And therefore we learn from this the tremendous lesson of gratitude. Gratitude even to animals, gratitude even to inanimate objects. The famous examples with the inanimate objects, which we learn in these portions also, is that the first three plagues of blood, frogs, and lice were, even though Moshe initiated the introduction of those plagues, but the actual implementation of the striking of the water and the striking of the ground to turn the water into blood and for the ground to produce lice or frogs, or the water to produce the frogs, that was actually performed by Aaron. Moshe was not allowed to strike the water or strike the ground. And the reason is because the water and the ground and the sand saved Moshe's life. We know the story of Moshe. He was saved in the river. And he also ran away from an Egyptian who was trying to kill him, and he hid himself inside the sand. So in order to maintain and sustain in his mind the appreciation of those things, even the inanimate objects which he received benefit from, he was not allowed to put his hand against them, to strike them, to produce the plagues, even though the plagues were going to be beneficial for the Jewish people and for himself. But no, you have to show appreciation. And it's not for the object itself. It's not for the animal itself, because they don't really have an awareness, a conscious moral awareness that they can appreciate what's being done for them, certainly the ground. But it's for us, it's for the human being who has that conscious awareness. We have to inculcate into ourselves a sense of gratitude and express gratitude to whatever we receive benefit from. Certainly people, but even inanimate objects as well. And that's what we learn from here. And that's what we learn from. That's the connection to the portion. But you're asking me another question. You're telling me, listen, we're supposed to be doing the 7th Aliyah this year. I just quoted you a verse from the 4th Aliyah. So I'm cheating. I'm breaking the rules over here. The verse about the dogs is in the 4th Aliyah. So what's going on? Am I deviating from my regular, schedule? How about the 7th Aliyah? Don't worry, in the 7th Aliyah as well. Because in the 7th Aliyah, the subject of the 7th Aliyah is it's right before the Exodus, a few verses before the actual Exodus, and the Torah delineates for us the special law of sanctity of the firstborn. So we know, many people are familiar with the mitzvah of pidyon bechor, sanctity of the firstborn, a Jewish male after the bris, and 30 days, after 30 days old, there's a special mitzvah of pidyon aben, redemption of the firstborn child. And the source of all of this is because in Mitzrayim, at the time of the slaying of the firstborn, the 10th plague, so when the Egyptian firstborn males were being slayed and killed, so automatic differentiation was taking place between them and the firstborn Jewish people, Jewish males. So the stark contrast between the firstborn Egyptians and the firstborn Jewish males was very pronounced, and it was clear, and it was in that precise moment as the Egyptian firstborns were being killed, in that very instantaneous moment, the Jewish firstborn males received this special sanctity. A special sanctity, not to say that they're better, but they are being elevated to a special role of being the Kohanim, the priests, the future priests of the temple. That's when that happened. Even though in the future, when the sin of the golden calf took place, that special privilege was removed from the firstborn males and then given to the tribe of Levi. But initially, the plan was the firstborn males did receive that special sanctity, and they always have that special, sanctity about them, and would have been applied to the service of the temple. In practice today, we have the ritual, the ceremony of transferring that kedusha through a ceremony, and then the baby is, so to speak, given to the Kohen, and it's a whole other. I'm not going to get into it right now, but that's the mitzvah of pidyon aben. But in the middle of this passage also describes not just the sanctification of the firstborn male human beings, but also the sanctification of firstborn animals as well. Is described over here, and it has to be set aside. And in the temple times, what was done with that animal, the firstborn sheep, the firstborn goat, the firstborn cow, it was given to the Kohen. It was actually given to the Kohen, and it was brought as a special offering by the Kohen. And then the Kohen and his family would eat of the meat of this bechor, this firstborn animal. Very special mitzvah, and that's what the Torah describes over here. All as a result, all emanating from the makas bechoros, the slaying of the firstborn. But in the middle of this, I'll read the verse. It says, "Avartel kol peter rechem." You shall transfer the firstborn of the womb of the animal to Hashem, to me. And then the next verse, "V'kol peter chamor." I mean, even the firstborn donkey is also holy and hallowed. Now, the problem with the firstborn donkey is this, and the reason why it's an anomaly is because the rule of firstborn animals only applies to kosher animals. A donkey is not kosher. So the donkey can't be given to the Kohen to be offered as a sacrifice and then be eaten by the Kohen and his family. But it has sanctity, the verse says. Even the firstborn donkey has sanctity. Can't be offered, though. Can't be eaten. So what do you do with it? You redeem it. The pasuk says, "Tifta b'seh." The sanctity which is upon it should then be redeemed and transferred. The concept of redemption, you transfer the sanctity from the animal and transfer it onto a kosher animal, a sheep, and then that sheep is then given to the Kohen and offers as a sacrifice. And this is the only exception to the rule of the halacha that the firstborn animal only applies to kosher species. It's the only the only non-kosher animal where the firstborn law applies to it, the donkey. Very, very unusual, right? And the question is why? What did the donkey do to deserve such elevated status of being a firstborn, having the sanctity of the firstborn? So the Medrash says, the Gemara says, one of the answers the Gemara gives is because, again, the same idea what we said before about gratitude. Because the donkeys, when the Jewish people, Rashi quotes this over here, Rashi says, when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, when they left Mitzrayim, with all of the possessions that they had to take with them when they left Mitzrayim, the donkeys helped the Jewish people as they left Mitzrayim. They helped schlep all the possessions of the Jewish people. And in gratitude towards that, in gratitude to the donkeys that afforded the Jewish people so much benefit in carrying all of their goods and possessions, so Hashem created a mitzvah d'oraisa, a biblical commandment of redemption of the firstborn donkey, or the sanctification of the firstborn donkey, but for technical reasons, because it's not kosher, the sanctity now has to be transferred to a kosher animal, and that brought in its stead. So the mitzvah d'oraisa, the mitzvah of sanctity, is because of the appreciation, the gratitude that this donkey deserves. It's the same idea, the same concept, the same idea. So it really hits home the importance of the gratitude to a donkey, to an unclean, non-kosher animal. The question one could ask, though, is this: when we contrast the dog to the donkey, the dog and the donkey, the dog is also given the appreciation for what it did in Mitzrayim. What does the dog get? It gets, it gets the scraps. Throw the scraps to the dog. But for the donkey also did something good for the Jewish people. But the donkey gets elevated to being kedusha, having sanctity. I mean, there's no comparison. The poor dog that's not fair. Why can't I get sanctified? Why can't there be a mitzvah of sanctification of the firstborn dog as well? What did the donkey do so much better than me? I didn't bark. I didn't howl. I didn't bark. And the donkey slept. And Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld was a very famous rabbi in Jerusalem, from the old Yishuv of Yerushalayim. Back in the day. I don't know, Uri, maybe your father and uncle probably knew him. You had relatives. Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, does that ring a bell to you? Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld? He was a very famous, very, in the early 1900s. And so he said, the difference is, the reason why the Torah affords more reward to the donkey than the dog is because the donkey schlepped. The donkey schlepped and the dog kept its mouth shut. What's a greater help to somebody when you schlep for them? When you schlep for them, the dog did a good thing. He kept his mouth shut. He didn't howl. But schlepping, picking up the bags and helping and schlepping, the benefit and the goodness of schlepping and helping in that respect, of physically getting into the mix and helping somebody schlep, is so much greater. And for that, the donkey was awarded with the kedushas bechor, the sanctification of the firstborn. I was in shul this morning. It was very funny because I walked out of shul this morning, and I'm Baruch Hashem, blessed to have my daughter and son-in-law lit above the shul, right? So as I was walking out the shul, Yosef Chaim, my son-in-law, was in the driveway. He was clearing off the snow off of the car to go to work, and he was holding my granddaughter, Adina. She was holding So of course I ran over to him. I want to hold the baby, and I'm thinking, and fine, saying hello to, and then but I had to rush. I was coming back to give the class, so I'm walking down this. I walk away, and I'm walking down the street, and I'm thinking, what a fool I am! What a fool! I'm coming here to speak about the importance of schlepping and taking on a burden of someone else, and that's why the donkey was given the sanctity of the firstborn. And here, poor Yosef Chaim is holding the baby, and he's trying to wipe off the car with the snow. So I said, I just turned around. I said, even though I was in a rush, I said, listen, you hold the baby. I'm gonna clean the snow off the car. So I felt good about myself. I felt bad at first, but at least I took care of that. But that's the important. That's why the donkey received that special sanctity, because of schlepping. And the dog, was got the reward, but not a great of a reward. So, when we talk about gratitude and appreciation, even to the donkey, I mean, the donkey symbolizes the impure animal. It's not a kosher animal. In fact, actually, there's another medrash says that the Egyptians were compared to donkeys, because the word donkey is the word chamor in Hebrew. Chamor means chomer, which means physical materialism and physicality. So the chamor, the donkey, also symbolizes a very base physical nature. And the Egyptians were very hedonistic and very physical. So therefore they're compared to donkeys. So it's a chiddush, it's a novelty that even the most unclean of animals, as the donkey, is also given this special sanctity. And then it's transferred to the sheep. So an interesting moral dilemma you could ask. To what are there any parameters for giving a chorus tov is the Hebrew expression for gratitude, recognizing the good that another person does for you, or recognizing the good that something gives you? Are there any parameters for that? In other words, do we show a chorus tov to an immoral person? A very immoral person, someone who's very immoral and unethical, does some kind of benefit for us. Should we hold back a chorus tov and gratitude for what they do because of their larger character traits and their larger personality, which is very far from being ethical and moral? How do we deal with that? So there was a story this is back in the probably early 1900s, again with this Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld from Yerushalayim. There was another famous rabbi, Rabbi Avraham Kook, also he was one of the leaders of Israel at the time, and they were both at a Pidyon Haben, a ceremony of the Pidyon Haben ceremony, and Rabbi Kook gets up and he starts speaking about this idea that we learn a tremendous lesson of a chorus tov, of gratitude from the donkey. And he related this lesson, which we just discussed, about the donkey and giving appreciation. And he then made an extrapolation. He said, therefore, we learn from this that even the most unclean of people who help us in some way, he was alluding to probably, the story doesn't really explicitly state this, but he said even those people who help us to come to Eretz Yisrael, because the donkeys were helping the Jews leave Egypt to go to Eretz Yisrael. So he applied it to even the unsavory, unethical, and all the different variations of kinds of people who help the Jewish people settle in the land of Israel. We have to show a chorus tov to them, even if they're doing it for very negative ulterior motives. No matter what, we have to show a chorus, just like we show a chorus tov to the donkey. So that's what he said. But then Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld got up and he said, "It's true. Everything you said is 100% true." He said, "However, let's pay attention to what the verse says about what happens to that donkey." Because the donkey itself, yes, we afford appreciation and gratitude towards it, hence it becomes holy, it's sanctified, but yet what do we do with it? One of two possibilities. Before I only read to you one of them, and that is it's redeemed, it's transferred, the sanctity is transferred to a sheep and then offered as a sacrifice. But then the pasuk says, if the owner chooses not to transfer the sanctity to a sheep and bring it as an offering, give it to the Kohen, then that donkey has to be killed. The owner of the donkey cannot benefit from it. The donkey has to be killed. At the end of the day, the donkey cannot be... So at the end of the day, no matter what gratitude we show the donkey, but because the donkey is an unclean animal, it can't be offered. So it has to be... So the focus has to now shift to the redemption and sanctity of the sheep being offered. And if the owner doesn't do that, the donkey has to be killed. So Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, he says, it's true we have to show appreciation to those who help us and whatever they do for us. Again, the story doesn't elaborate further on this, but I interpret it as follows, that we have to really keep it very, very compartmentalized. To go ahead and then honor people and then to exaggerate the level of honor and appreciation for somebody who's done something good for us, we have to be very careful, because if the person's larger personality and character is unclean, then the appreciation has to be very, very much compartmentalized. It made me think about something which happens frequently. Something to think about is many times there are banquets which are held, there are fundraising banquets which are held, and people are given honors in all sorts of contexts, different venues, different groups, and they'll honor people who are unsavory. But because of the donation, because of the big donation they gave to the organization. So in that respect, Hakaras Tov, appreciation, gratitude is in place for that gift. But to now, to expand it and to elevate this individual and make somebody who is presenting himself as being an quote unquote an unclean person in society, and now to elevate and to sanctify him through and through, it's a perspective. We've got to be careful with that type of thing. We've got to put, so appreciation, gratitude, but keep it within its right context, right parameters. So that is that's a practical application. But when we talk about gratitude, I was thinking about it in general. I started looking up online. There's a very famous branch of modern psychology you may have heard called positive psychology. Martin Seligman. He taught this course, still does it at University of Pennsylvania. It's like a branch of so I was looking at anything to do with positivity. We spoke several months, maybe a year ago, about a great book called Positivity Bias. But I was reading some things about some articles about, just going to read some of the things, positive psychology and the impact of gratitude. Better sleep provides better sleep, better immunity, higher self-esteem, decreased stress, lower blood pressure, less anxiety and depression. These are from different studies. I'm summarizing all these different things. When people live a life of gratitude and appreciation, stronger relationships and emotional awareness, higher levels of optimism, better memory and bodily function. And I'm just reading from a chart over here, the gratitude in the brain, the brain science of gratitude and how it impacts, it wires and fires new neural connections to the bliss center. It fosters cognitive restructuring by evoking positive thinking. It enhances dopamine and serotonin, the neurotransmitters responsible for happiness, and it reduces fear and anxiety by regulating the stress hormones. So no one can disagree and undermine the importance of gratitude. But this is what we learn from these portions, and how gratitude is emphasized at the very departure of the land of Egypt as the Jewish people are leaving. And as we know that portions are now tracking the journey of the Jewish people to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. And as one of my favorite works, the Chovos Levavos, says that the foundation of serving God and embracing Torah is appreciation for all of the blessings that God has given to us. We can't begin the activity of serving our Creator, giving ourselves over to God, giving ourselves over and serving our Maker, serving Hashem, unless we appreciate all that He gives for us. It's true in human relationships. Very hard to give oneself over to somebody else unless he or she appreciates what they're doing for them. So service of God depends upon gratitude. It depends upon Hakaras Hatov, appreciation. And therefore, it's not by accident that the lesson of Hakaras Hatov comes out in the very last few verses before as the Jewish people are leaving Mitzrayim, to hit home the point and announce to us that we have to show gratitude. We have to have gratitude for everything in life, whatever people give to us, and even the inanimate objects, and even the unholy sources. We have to express gratitude, albeit perhaps in a way of proper parameters and control. And then, I was thinking as I was in shul this morning, and I'm speaking personally, it's easy to lose sight of the tremendous power and potential that our daily prayers have for us. Because when you look at these websites and read these articles and about positive psychology, in the world at large, there's no system. There is no system. There is no system which demands the practice of these good behaviors. So they talk about having a gratitude log, making a gratitude diary. You've got to be self-motivated to do that. We have to just appreciate the blessing of mitzvahs, because mitzvahs give us a program. They force us to do the things which are good for us. You go to shul. I go to shul this morning. I'm standing in shul, and I'm saying my morning blessings, the Birkas HaShachar. Right? The Birkas HaShachar is the blessings we say every single morning when we start davening. And it can become a ritual. It can become a rote activity. But if you pay attention to the words, it's unbelievable. You could spend, literally, a person could spend half an hour just meditating on these blessings, right? I'm just pick a few of them. Pokeach Ivrim, Baruch Atah Hashem. Bless you that you give me eyesight, that I can see with my eyes. And you say those words slowly. Appreciate Malbish Arumim, that you give us clothing, you clothe us. Mati Asurim, that we are free to move. We're free. We have mobility. What a bracha that is. We're not, God forbid, bound in a wheelchair, God forbid, in a bed. Zokev Kefufim, we can stand up. Rokal Aretz Alamayim, we can be able to walk. Sha'asali Keltzark, we have our shoes, we have our clothing, we have our, God prepares us, gives us strength. Blessing after blessing after blessing. And throughout the entire davening, it's all about enunciating those words of gratitude, of appreciation, all that Hashem gives to us. And, Modem Anachnu Lach, Modem in the morning, Modani Lefanecha, with the very first words which we express from our mouths in the morning. I've said this before, the very first words are Modani Lefanecha. I give gratitude to you, Hashem, for having blown the neshama back inside of me. And, and of course we have the 100 blessings a day of a food, the nuts and the raisins and the bananas and the cakes and the food, all the food which we eat. Every item we put into our food, it's another opportunity of showing hakaras hatov, gratitude. But think about the benefits, not just spiritual, but also brings physical, emotional, psychological, and health benefits along with it. So the power of gratitude. So may we all be appreciative of all of the thousands, the gazillions of blessings we have in our life, and not compromise the expression of appreciation to even things which seems to be insignificant, but certainly even the inanimate objects, even the animals, but certainly people in our lives, and certainly our close members of our families, our spouses and our children, our parents. We should really show appreciation, and of course, above all of them, is to show appreciation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to Hashem, for all of the things we have in our lives. So may we merit to see Mashiach coming very quickly in the zechus of our increased appreciation and gratitude for all of his blessings in our lives.